Dessa, welcome to the Livewire House Party.
Thanks.
This is radio, of course, is notoriously a highly visual medium. So I want to ask you about what I see behind you, which looks like either very complicated music or you're plotting something.
Like
What's
a
going on
Goodwill
behind
Hunting
you?
kind
What is
of
this?
a math
what
equation.
Is this wall full of writing?
I mean, I think probably it is music and a plan and goodwill and hopefully hunting. I spent I don't know, maybe $100 on like huge 3M Post-it notes that I put around my apartment so that I can kind of map out the new songs or essays or book ideas that I'm working on. Mm-hmm.
Well, that explains how it is that you're able to do so much stuff, because the more that I learned about you, the more there was to find out about your various talents and interests. You're a musician, you're a rapper, you wrote a memoir, you're hosting a podcast it's called Deeply Human. It's about human behavior. Oh, how did you get that gig?
Man, that gig, I have to admit, I didn't seek, although I was super excited when it kind of came knocking. So I've always had an interest in science and human behavior. And I had done like a couple of one-off live events, trying to combine an interest in behavioral research with music or writing. So something that felt like science, but it didn't feel like eat your vegetables, and something that felt like a concert, but you came home smarter. And after having done a few of those events, I got a note from a colleague at APM who said, "Hey, I know that the BBC is working on a new podcast. We're partnering with them, and they might be looking for an American host. Would you be interested?" And
do you have
I threw all of my hats into the ring.
Do you have did you study that in college? Do you have a background in that, or have you just been kind of learning on the fly?
In sexy science and and musical education? I don't know. I think I've just been interested in it. I studied philosophy in college. So in that way, I suppose there is sort of like a generalist's curiosity that's rewarded in that field. You know what I mean? So like a lot of the philosophers you might study are philosophers of science or philosophers of art, particularly like the old dead guys used to write about all of it. So
what kind of music did you grow up listening to?
I liked then, and I still like now, a lot of like pop music, like a high sugar content, movable, lots of Michael Jackson in the house, Sade, some Tina Turner. But my dad was also a classical musician. And so I listened to him playing on a nylon acoustic guitar. And he was also a lutenist, which is like an Elizabethan precursor to the guitar.
Whoa.
So he played the lute. Mm-hmm.
So then when did you actually start getting into hip hop? When did you start rapping?
I was really late for a rapper. Rappers are like violinists. They start when they're like as high as your leg. So for me, it was circuitous in that I had really wanted to be a writer, and I wasn't sure how to break into that field. It's a very like gate-kept, prescriptive path into that literary world, And I wasn't really sure how to get in. And then I was encouraged by my best friend, Jacqueline, to go to a poetry slam. She was like, "Yo, I think you could do this." And I was like, "I think I might be able to do this." And so I competed at the next one and I won. But unbeknownst to me, like all the best poets were out of town. It was very...
I hope you worked that
dice.
into your poem at the next slam. I won last time, but it was because everybody was gone.
Excuse me, hang on.
Yeah, sure. If you want to grab some water or something,
I'm gonna.
go for it.
Thanks.
Oh, you got some. Okay, good.
So, it was through. I'm gonna just talk through this. Until
Yeah,
it
no
clears.
problem. This is why we edit everything down, so don't even worry about
Also,
it.
so lucky this isn't live. This is like the nightmare, the performance nightmare. Is that you aspirate some LaCroix or something.
I had a thing happen once, actually, on NPR, Minnesota Public Radio. I was filling in on a talk show, and I had a bad cold, and I went into like one of those weird like coughing fits where you just can't stop, like it's just
God.
and everybody
worst.
in the room, I was like interviewing these local politicians, and they didn't know what to do, and there was like a caller on the line from Shakopee, and they didn't know what to do. It was massive, embarrassment for everybody involved on the Carrie Miller show for like 2 solid minutes. So
I feel like I would be mentally telepathing to everyone else, like, why can't you
I
help
know.
me?
Say something, Brad.
You're a politician. What's your platform, bro?
I know,
Like,
it was
just
bad.
anything.
So this is low stakes.
Thank you.
Sure.
So for me, the entryway into hip hop was through that slam scene. And there, while competing as a poet, essentially, I met a bunch of members of the Minneapolis hip hop community and was invited to start performing my rhyming poems over music.
Were you good at it at first?
Not really. No, I mean, I think it's like maybe when you see a little kid that has like some bass talent, but that's like pretty unrefined. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So like, there was no surgical skill. There was maybe some, like, I was more of a linebacker than an ophthalmologist then. Like, I was generally good with language. I mean, I could make some rad rhymes, but the ability to deliver fluidly and confidently and also, weirdly enough, to learn how to be yourself. I think so much of art, when you first get into it, is an exercise of imitating what inspired you. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of more work than you think it would be to try to peel back the layers of convention that you might not even know you're adopting.
This is the Livewire House Party. We're talking with Dessa. She is putting out something called the IDES Project. It's a series of songs that you're putting out on the 15th of each month. Now, I think this might have been the last song that you put out. This is fascinating to me. It has no verbs in it.
Yes. I'm pushing my glasses all the way up my nose and into my brain.
I couldn't quite wrap my mind around what that would sound like, but let's just play a little bit of it. This is Talking Business.
Knock, knock, 10 o'clock, housekeeping with breakfast. All shot, coffee hot, airborne in the French press. FaceTime on the bedspread, color nearly half dead. Still recognizable as a regular guest. Missing wallet, missing watch. Something in this tumbler probably stronger than the double scotch. Dizzy talk with busy cops.
So did you just wake up one morning and like to challenge yourself and your kind of like grammar brain and musician brain think, could I do this? Could I do a whole song with no verbs in it?
I mean, okay, so I know how nerdy it sounds to be like, oh, here's a song with no verbs. But I also thought that even for, people who are not particularly interested in grammar, I think there's an effect that creates, in the same way that like I'm not particularly well versed in a lot of like the two-dimensional visual arts. Mm-hmm. I said that like I am versed in three-dimensional visual arts. I don't know.
Four-dimensional, sure, that's easy for me. I'm the Van Gogh of that.
But I know that if someone painted in one end of the color spectrum, or did a color study, we're working in primarily blues, even if I don't know why, that's going to have an effect on me because the raw material is distinct. And so I really liked the idea, and I'd had it for a while before executing it, of trying to tell a story, but just like in snapshots, so it's almost like you have, hundreds of still images that when you view them in sequence, create the impression. And in this case, I decided to do it sort of like a crime film noir vibe, so by the end of the song, you realize who did it.
There's a real momentum to the song. Like you're really kind of just going along for the ride and again, whether or not you know what a verb is, like if you still remember that stuff from English class, like it's still very entertaining musically. This is a Livewire House Party. We got to take a quick break. We're talking to Dessa. And when we come back, we're going to hear a song from the IDES Project. And we're going to find out what the proper clothing to wear in the recording studio is based on a recent tweet that she sent out. Stay with us. This is Livewire from PRX. All right, here we go. Come back. Welcome back to the Livewire House Party. I'm Luke Burbank here with Elena Passarella. We are talking to Dessa, the musician and writer and rapper and person behind this IDES project where she's putting out a new song on the 15th of every month. You tweeted out recently that comfortable clothes while recording, you can't stress this enough. A little bit of the magic missing from the last take might be in the sliver of the bandwidth your brain has devoted to the dig of the underwire for the last 6 hours. I'm curious if you have a go-to recording outfit that just like helps you focus completely on the task at hand.
Yeah, I kind of do. I mean, I think initially, like when you see videos of people recording in studio, at least in the genres in which I work. So it's mostly like pop or R&B or rap. Very often they look. I'm gonna give that a second. Sorry, New
Sure.
York.
Oh, that's all right. This is the house party. You're in New York.
Yeah,
The honk
positive.
party.
We are in a residential setting. Okay, so very often when you see people recording in studio, no, they look really cool. They're in like essentially a lot of the clothes that they might perform in. And when I started recording myself, so like I engineer my own vocals, although I work with a lot of really talented, mix engineers to get the thing right. But I record my own vocals in my closet. And first of all, a lot of time the HVAC, meaning like the ventilation system in a home environment, as you guys well know in audio, can very often create like a that just runs through an entire take. You might not even notice it if it's just one, but as soon as you add one harmony on another harmony on another harmony, all of a sudden you've got running in the background. So you have to turn a lot of that off, which means it gets hot. So for me, it's like a great sports bra, barefoot, and gym shorts, man. That is how the work gets done.
I'm wondering, if in the early days or even if in these modern times, if you find yourself bumping up against any kind of pushback as a woman in hip hop, like what's the experience been like for you to be in this genre?
Yeah. Yes, that I've definitely experienced some pushback. I've also experienced like, I don't know how you'd say this exactly, but like people who didn't mean harm. Like, so for example, if I was like, it was one of my first headlining gigs when I really started to be able to like draw around the country. Draw meaning, attract a full room, and I think it was California. And I was kind of stoked. I had my big hoop earrings on. I had black, because when you sweat through it, it doesn't show. And I was running to stage and this guy like flags me down and he's like, yo, can I get another beer?
Oh, no.
But in his defense, it's like, he's not trying to hurt me. And I guess I'm wearing black, I could be a server. So there's that kind of stuff. But then there's also like, I think I was just ready for clear, crisp, crossed lines, at which point I would unsheath my flaming sword and go all Joan of Arc. And there have been so few occasions where it's that clean cut. Like the dudes who are total gentlemen backstage sometimes have really foul language on stage. It's just complicated. And then some of the dudes who seem really nice are total jerks off stage. And then also there's the question, as I'm older and thinking about that kind of inquiry more thoughtfully now. And also in light of a lot of the new words that I think we've learned as we've talked about race in the US, like to what extent do I participate in misogyny? If I was raised by a misogynistic culture, how do I get it out of me? Right. And then also like, how high up the rib cage does the douchebag have to touch before I take out my flaming sword? It's all, you know what I mean? So there have been plenty of occasions to be insulted, people touching my hair where they certainly would never do, like, business partners, tousling my hair in a way that I cannot imagine them doing to male colleagues. And then on one occasion, having to bring a male colleague to the settlement room, which is where you get paid essentially in cash after the show sometimes, to say like, yo, I filled this room and I have it in writing and you can't pay me half now. And when men were in the room, he paid me my full.
You wrote something, Dessa, in the New York Times Magazine that I thought was, and we interview lots and lots of musicians on this show, I thought it was maybe the most well-described, the experience of being a live performer who has no more live shows during the pandemic. What has it been like for you?
Thanks, man, for that compliment. I mean, it's a cocktail of feels, all of them not necessarily compatible with one another. There is longing, there's fear to return to the stage again. I think there's also just like, to be totally frank with you, so much of my life was built around that. My friends were the people in the van, and my sense of importance and my, like, the way that I thought that I contributed to the world, so all of a sudden you feel sometimes like an extra puzzle piece, and the image is done and you're just an edge piece hanging out. Like, I don't know where I fit as readily. At the same time, there is absolutely like a sense of unchecked grandiosity that is sometimes associated with what it takes to get up there in front of, you know, a lot of people in bright lights. And I've commiserated with a few other performers that like looking at old images of ourselves, you know, old movies or whatever, old clips online. It's like, who does she think she is? Like, it's been a really demoralizing year, you know?
You have been keeping busy though. You've been creating a lot of stuff. Among those things, you did a sort of Hamilton style song for the public radio show Marketplace about Janet Yellen, the Fed chief. That was called "Who's Yellin' Now?" I'm curious, like, did you have to do a lot of research on monetary policy?
Absolutely. I know about as much about monetary policy as I do about three-dimensional visual art. So it took it took some research, but I like that stuff too, you know? So I spent some time on like Khan Academy and listened to Janet Yellen's old speeches to try to figure out, you know, what her approach was and what set her apart, and also just make sure I didn't, you know, inadvertently goof up any of my terms. Yeah.
Well, this new song that you have coming out on the IDES singles project is called Terry Gross, which I think at this point makes you officially the sort of rap chronicler of all public radio, right? I mean, you have a Janet Yellen related song on Marketplace and a song now that's called Terry Gross, right? I mean, you're comfortable with that title?
I suppose the next one has to be called like Tote Bag. Tote Bag.
Yeah, what rhymes with tote bag? What rhymes with Chardonnay?
I'm not going there. Okay.
So tell me a little about this song. First of all, the song is catchy as hell, but it's also it's a really fascinating song. How did this sort of develop?
You know, it's been interesting. I think the process by which I've been working with my collaborators during the pandemic has meaningfully changed the product. It's changed what we're making. So like, I guess it was the end of last year that it felt like it was time to release some new music, but the model that we've used for so long, which rests really heavily on touring, obviously was not executable during the pandemic season. And so we decided instead to put out a song every month and then to try to brand it in a way that would remind people to check for it every month. I was like, let's call it IDES because then they'll remember, hopefully, you know, when we land on the 15th. But writing songs so quickly and not having the luxury of indulging the like neurotic hyper perfectionist in me has changed the kind of work that we're doing in ways that I'm surprised that I sort of like. So like, I think usually I would just polish the stone, you know, out of existence sometimes.
Yeah.
And you know, it's easy to like over edit. You know, you sometimes I think sand away the charm. And so I don't often do songs that are super playful, but there's been a lot more play, I think, because we're working fast. It's like you can't do gravitas every month. You know what I mean? In 30 days, I can't do that well, you know, that fast. And so it's forced us to do some like more playful stuff and some more pop stuff. And I really like that.
Well, you said in a TED Talk that your mom said all of your music is like music to bleed out to, which has got to be tough to hear from a maternal figure. So now she can't say that anymore because you're not exclusively making those kinds of songs, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's distressing to hear from a maternal figure because, like, I don't want to worry you, but also, like, who are you hanging out with that you know that phrase?
Where'd you get that terminology?
Where'd you learn that, Mom?
Why are you saying that I'm lit right now? What is happening?
Fire emoji.